Hundreds, potentially thousands of Australian school and university students walked out of class this week on the 13th to protest against the rise in Pauline Hanson. The tagline was "Say no to Hanson." There was posters saying migrants are welcome, Hanson is not, because apparently nothing screams tolerance and diversity and inclusion more than telling an elected politician that they are not welcomed. What happened to the acceptance and free expression and open-mindedness of the left? Surely those values still matter, or is it only when you agree? The irony, guys, is almost too good to be true. Welcome back to the THELMSHOW. Alright guys, so clearly we are not in our usual studio this week. We're making do with what we have here. It was a shit fight to get this together, but hopefully the visuals are okay for everyone. But first of all, take a look at this video. Someone from One Nation went undercover to this protest, so take a look.
Aston, do you believe that Pauline Hanson is a fascist?
Oh, well, 100%.
What do you think the punishment for that fascism should be?
I'll bring back the guillotine, I think.
Guillotine? Isn't that a bit ironic?
Yeah.
That she's a fascist, but you're the one who wants to kill your political enemies?
Yeah, definitely. That is definitely ironic.
So would that make you a fascist?
Possibly.
Oh my god, guys, like, I don't even know what to say. Like, that is just embarrassing. And as you can see, like, the questions that this guy was asking, a lot of them couldn't answer them. So it's like, are you even protesting if you don't really know how to answer a question that's a pretty simple question for starters as well? And also, there were other chants like, Hanson is a bitch. First of all, rude. Second of all, that's an insult. Alright, that's on the claim. Also, I thought they were there to make a political argument. There's no argument to that. There is no substance. There's no logic. That is just an insult. And honestly, if this is the level of like political debate that we're at, God help us. This is just ridiculous. And also, if you have a look at some of the other images of the protest on that day, you can also see, like, is this just a small group of people that left school because they got a day off school and they didn't want to take classes and they went to a protest in Sydney? I don't know. The group did not look that big. That's all I'm trying to say here. It looks like a small, very small protest. But anyway, take a look at this sign. This one just really got me thinking. It said, migrants are welcome, Hanson is not. So, my question is, what are you actually advocating for? All right, you went to a protest. That's your sign. I should be allowed to ask you a question. Migrants are welcome. To what extent? Is it over like hundreds of thousands of migrants per year, leading to housing and social amenities to fall behind because, well, it's simple, it's supply and demand. And I would ultimately think leading to a decline in our standard of living. Or are you saying migrants are welcome? Is that implying open borders, which would be a surrender of control of our country? Because borders are what makes a nation a nation. So look, my question is, what are these people actually advocating for? And what is the logic behind saying migrants are welcome? To what extent? What would be your housing policy? What would be your policy to potentially handle a rapid population growth that would affect many sectors and put strain on social amenities like school and, like shops? We're already seeing a shortfall of housing, so how would you speed up the rate of a build? Also, just saying, Hanson out, that's not providing much substance there, is it? And I'm not making any assumptions here, but it's just so contradictory yet again. Because I thought, aren't the left the ones who wanted the hate speech laws? Doesn't the left try to brand themselves as the more kind and compassionate side of politics? Because calling someone a racist bitch and saying that she should go to hell, first of all, even saying that's just disgusting to say. However, it's not exactly kind, is it? Don't you think it's a little bit more hateful? And also, just imagine, guys, imagine if that was a right-wing protest protesting a leftist group. Imagine. Now take a look at this video of the organisers behind this protest. Let's take a look.
Now, the protest is backed by several groups, all from the far left, including the Socialist Alternative and the Adelaide High School Anti-Capitalists Association. Similar protests are being put on around the country in Sydney, Brisbane, Canberra, Melbourne, etc.
All right, so look, I suppose that some groups that organised this protest, however, the fact of the matter is that a lot of people at that protest on that day were school students. All right, and I'm not a huge fan of the schooling system. Okay, I think schools have way too much power to really push whatever they want onto the youth. And I do not like that, because school should be a place where debate is taught. But I've always said that ideology from one side of politics does not take over the conversation. And based on my own experience, that has certainly been the case, especially with school teachers and everything. So I think that teachers probably should not have that much involvement in politics. And just last month, members of the Socialists in schools are running for MP positions, saying that the Victorian Socialists have announced that they are aiming to contest every lower house seat in Victoria. So, look, make up your own mind on that. But anyway, moving on a little bit, with that being said, look, this is a hard argument, all right? Because I disagree with people on the right when they say that, teenagers shouldn't be talking about politics because of their age. Look, I disagree with that. It makes it hard to argue that point when a protest like this happens and you look at it and you're just like, there's no substance to any of your claims here. Why are you protesting? It's hard to, argue that point. However, with that being said, why I argued that teenagers, it's good to get involved in politics is because while, a lot of them are under 18 and can't vote yet, the fact of the matter is that they're only a few years away from doing so. And then shutting down their political ideas simply because of their age and saying, you shouldn't even speak about those topics because you're potentially not as experienced, I think that's a disservice to society. Because look at that protest. All right? I would say that a lot of people, probably 16 and above, they're voting soon. But, they're up and coming voters, so whether you agree with what they're saying or not, I don't think they should discourage people from engaging in politics simply because they're young. Instead, debate them. And if they crumble in their arguments, then hopefully they'll learn from that and they'll learn how politics and political issues work. But moving on a little bit, from a younger person's perspective, it kind of feels like right now that an overwhelming majority of Gen Z believe in socialism because it's all over socials. All right, and the protest just happened, so it feels like everybody's on the left and believes in socialism and things. However, I just want to say I do not agree with any of that. Okay, and I know a hell of a lot of people my age who do not as well. So let me lead by example, though, through saying this. If you disagree, debate or voice your reasoning. So what are these students actually protesting, and what do I disagree with them on? Because whilst their arguments may fall apart if they were asked a question, I don't think mine would. So here are my 2 cents. It looks like socialism is the root of these protests, okay? And I fundamentally disagree, because at its baseline, socialism is literally the means of production being owned by the government or a group of people, which is fairly distributed to the population, all right? So it's a confiscation of property, so it's a redistribution of wealth, all right? And I disagree with that for 2 main reasons. The first one is human psychology contradicts socialism. Right? People are generally motivated by the reward of their own effort. So if the wealth someone else earns through hard work, or really just work in general, is largely really taken away from them and redistributed to people who, mind you, are capable of contributing but choose not to, I think the incentive of working hard, you really just lose that due to it, because human nature responds to personal incentives, not just collective outcomes. And the second reason, I think socialism does not support freedom. Right? Freedom, when you think about it, is really to own something, right? To build something, the freedom to start a business, make your own choices, and actually benefit from the work you put in. And the more control you give to the government over the economy, the more control it ultimately has over those choices. And to clarify, because this always comes into the discussion, whenever you say, I don't support socialism, I support capitalism, this always comes into the discussion, and it's anarchy. Right? Are you an anarchist? No. Okay? It's a spectrum. All right? Social services like governments, a small government, police, hospitals, they're essential to society. Because, like I said, there's a spectrum about it. Just because you want services like I listed does not mean you're a socialist. I would question how far some people want to move along that spectrum. The level of social services we have today I think they do provide a safety net while rewarding people for their effort and contribution. So it's basically capitalism. But if that balance already exists, what exactly are socialists seeking beyond that? Because from what I can see, socialism to me is just a group of people wanting things given to them rather than earned themselves. However, I would say that a lot of people at that protest would largely be probably around 16 or above that. And here's where it gets interesting. All right, in England, there have been proposals to lower the voting age to 16, which is wanting to be in effect for the next election. And if Australia followed that, or is going to follow it, because, we tend to follow after whatever England's doing, then the people at that protest would largely be voters, which is honestly just kind of scary to think about. And I don't say that because of the age thing of not being experienced and all of that argument. There are some pretty strong arguments for lowering the voting age. For starters, it would give, young people a reason to become engaged in politics earlier. It would maybe encourage responsibility and help teenagers understand how government decisions are actually going to affect their lives. Because at the end of the day, today's young people are going to live with the consequences of political decisions a lot longer than pretty much anyone else currently voting. However, doing that, there are some topics to be addressed. The first one I would think is political education. Right? Schools, in my opinion, do a pretty poor job of actually teaching students how politics works. A student leaves school without really understanding the political system. Things like how laws are made, how preferences work, what a ballot is, how do you vote, do you register to vote, all of that sort of thing, how to properly evaluate a political argument, or even who are the main figures in politics, who is the PM, And I think that should be basic skills that should be learned. But a lot of young people are graduating without a strong understanding of any of that. And I'm pretty sure most 18-year-olds couldn't even tell you who the last opposition leader was, which is pretty concerning. And the second issue is influence within the classroom. Now, teachers, should absolutely teach politics. Of course they should. However, there's a massive difference between educating someone and persuading someone. Right? I think the role of a teacher should be to explain different viewpoints, set it out. What is capitalism? What is socialism? What's your values attributed to that? Give the student the tool, but do not, they can come to their own conclusion off that. Give them the tools to figure it out for themselves. But too often, I think students are exposed to political opinions without necessarily being given the tools to challenge them, or question them, or evaluate them for themselves. And importantly, this isn't just a problem for 16-year-olds. It affects 18-year-olds too. Whether we keep the voting age at 18 or lower it to 16, we still have a generation of young people entering adulthood without enough political knowledge and without enough experience in critical thinking and debate. So look, this whole position that's maybe going to come to Australia about lowering the voting age to 16, I think it would be pretty simple. If you want to lower the voting age, we should first improve political education, which would be complex to do because you're going after the curriculum and all that sort of thing. I think you should, though, teach students how the government actually works and teach them what impact they're going to have off that vote that they're going to cast. Because, once we've done that, then, maybe would be able to support 16-year-olds and give them the vote. Maybe, but I feel like it's quite a while away at this stage, which is a good thing because we have a lot of other things going on. But to end this video, did these protests actually change anything? Probably not. And the good news is that left-wing parties are not even that popular right now. The Greens, the Socialists, according to Roy Morgan's recent poll, One Nation's primary support is up 2% to 26% ahead of ALP, down 2% to 25.5%. So that is some good news. However, with that being said, some would argue, regardless of polling and popularity, Australia right now is exhibiting socialist trends. And I think that's where the conversation gets a hell of a lot more interesting. But this is the end of this video. What are your thoughts on socialism and the recent protests that occurred? As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.